This is Pat Boone, host of the Inner Strengths Foundry podcast. I believe we are all fearfully and wonderfully made, and I help husbands, fathers, and providers understand what that means for them so they are more valuable to their friends, family, and organizations. I accomplish this by working through organizations and individuals to build their inner strengths. I've held several positions in the public and private sectors and in leadership positions for the past 17 years. I've owned and operated my own business, and I am also a Christian. I love to learn and have focused my learning around science and psychology, the Bible, and gathering bits of wisdom from my almost quarter century of experience being a husband, father, and provider. I pull from all these areas during this podcast and in my life coaching practice. The Inner Strengths Foundry podcast serves two purposes. One, to help you build your inner strengths by providing knowledge, hope, and perspective. And two, to help me build my inner strengths so I can be even more effective to you. In today's episode, we'll dive deep into the importance of delegation of authority, sharing practical insights to help you balance responsibilities and forge a path to more efficient and fulfilling endeavors. Welcome to today's episode of Inner Strengths Foundry podcast. Let's dive right in. So the other day I was listening to Dr. Barbara O'Neill, and I watched a lot of her stuff. She's got a lot of great information on taking care of your body and foods and herbal medicines and so forth. She had a reel that I watched, so right there, you're only getting part of the story right there. And she shared her belief that we should never force our kids to take medicine or eat specific food or eat their food or whatever, because they need to make that decision for themselves. And it got me thinking about this. And she had an example, and I couldn't find the video, or else I would include the link here so you can make your own decision. But it got me thinking about kids making decisions. And I don't fully agree with what she was saying. I think there's a lot of times that parents need to step in, especially when time is of the essence. You don't have time to mess around with certain things or wait for your child to make a decision. There are times where you just have to step in. In my view, kids aren't fully developed enough to make decisions. Yes, absolutely, we need to teach them how to make decisions, and that is important, but I think there's times where parents need to step in, and it got me thinking about the topic of delegation of authority in general. So for the purposes of this episode, I'm assuming two things. One, that you as a listener are interested in personal growth and you want to develop your inner strengths in yourself and in others. And two, you also want to learn about and you also want to mitigate and avoid risk in your own life. And this is where I'm coming from as I share my perspective on delegation of authority in our lives. So in the first segment, I'm going to define the delegation of authority, discuss benefits, and maybe even bust some myths. First of all, delegation of authority is a process of transferring or entrusting specific responsibilities, tasks, and decision-making powers from one person to another. So in essence, delegation of authority involves granting someone the permission, autonomy, and accountability to carry out certain tasks or make decisions on behalf of the delegator. If you are someone that doesn't like to or has a hard time delegating authority, maybe you have a trouble with trusting people, I want to share 3 benefits that come with delegating your authority. So first of all, you will have increased productivity and efficiency. So delegating tasks and responsibilities allows you to focus on higher priority or more strategic activities. It frees up your time and energy to tackle tasks that are best suited to your skills and experience. And by distributing work among team members or family members, you can accomplish more in less time. This leads to increased overall productivity and efficiency. Secondly, there's an empowerment involved and skill development. So delegating empowers others by providing them with opportunities to take on new challenges, make decisions, and develop their skills and expertise. It fosters a sense of ownership and responsibility, which can boost confidence and motivation among those to whom you delegate. They gain valuable experience and can become more self-reliant. And thirdly, you will have an improved work-life balance and reduce stress. Delegating helps you achieve a better work-life balance by preventing burnout and reducing stress. When you share responsibilities, you can avoid overburdening yourself. In personal life, it can lead to a more harmonious family environment by ensuring that everyone contributes to household tasks and childcare, reducing the burden on any one individual. So those are the three benefits of delegating of authority: increased productivity and efficiency, empowerment and skill development, and improve work-life balance and reduce stress. Myths related to delegation of authority. The first myth: you're just the boss and you tell people what to do. Now, from my own experience with folks who feel this way and operate this way, that's one way to look at it. But I'm telling you right now, it's not effective. Delegation of authority is actually the opposite of this philosophy. Secondly, it's not your fault if something happens. So when you delegate authority, you think, well, they made that decision. Is there a mistake? That's on them. Well, think of it this way, though. If something good happens, if that's your way of thinking, if something good happens, you can't take the credit either. But that's not the case at all. You're still accountable, first of all. If something goes bad, you're still accountable. But if something goes well, you got to keep in mind that you delegated your authority and you made a choice. So the person that you delegated to did something good, and you can take credit for giving that person the authority to make that choice. You made a good choice in the person that you delegated to. So it goes both ways. You have to take fault. You're still accountable, but you can take the good too. You just need to be good at choosing the right people. And the third myth related to delegation of authority is it's out of my hands. I don't believe this, not for 1 second. If you delegate authority and you give someone the ability to make a decision that doesn't involve you necessarily, to me, it's even more in your hands. If you think about something bad happening, I mean, you could make the decision and something bad could happen. So the danger still exists, but now somebody else is making the call. You've delegated your authority to somebody else. You have the responsibility to prepare the decision maker. You need to choose the decision maker wisely, and then you need to trust them after they've earned it. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So the three myths: you're the boss, you just tell people what to do. I don't believe that. Whatever happens after you've delegated, it's not your fault. Don't believe that. We're still accountable, and whatever happens, it's out of my hands. Again, it's a myth. You have the responsibility. It's still your responsibility, and you have an additional responsibility to prepare the decision maker. Now, in the next segment, I'm going to talk a little bit about delegation of authority in the family. So in terms of your marriage and kids. So in my view, leaving some decisions to kids is not logical and not recommended. As I mentioned earlier, parents need to assess the danger of waiting for an obvious decision from kids. And the thing we need to remember here is, as kids, and even as adults to many degrees here, what motivates a kid's behavior? Well, it's the here and now. They're just focused on this present moment. They don't think about half an hour from now, an hour from now, a week from now, a month from now. They don't think about that. And second, pleasure over pain. They want pleasure. And those are the two major drivers for kids. Teaching kids to make sound decisions and choosing well is extremely important. Yes, I agree that we need to do that. But there's a lot of parenting theories out there that kids should choose everything. What they eat for breakfast, what they eat for all their meals, what they should wear, choice after choice after choice. And first of all, that can add a lot of time to your day, a lot of waiting time. And So yes, you can allow that to happen, but you need to balance that with getting stuff done and meeting deadlines and so forth. The second thing I want to bring out here is that choice overload is a thing. And there's a lot of research around the effects of having too many choices. Choices also need to be informed. And kids simply do not have the ability, as I mentioned before, to link present behavior to future benefits. So limiting choices is a parenting strategy. Delegating authority to kids should be done with caution. It should be tested, monitored, and corrected. So work with your kids, let them make some choices, observe their choices, kind of test them a little bit here and there, monitor those choices, and then if they're going down a path that is not good for them, then correct those choices and keep working with them. So they need to earn that. Choices can be made when trust is earned and the child matures and has the information to make informed decisions. And also, I think it's within circumstances. So parents need to assess the circumstances to warrant whether the child is capable of making the decision. Rushing out into freezing temperature, you're not going to let your son or daughter choose whether they're going to put on a coat or not. You're going to put a coat on them. They're not going to have a choice about that. So when kids are real young, in my view, parents need to make the bulk of the choices that impact immediate or long-term future health and well-being of the child. When we start allowing the children to make choices, then we also, once they make the choice, we make them live with the consequences. Quick story from when I was a kid, probably 10 years old or so, and Dad left a bunch of candies. Our favorite candies, Whoppers, bowl in the living room. And I was always the first up and downstairs getting ready for school, and I saw those, and I took one. And I was making my breakfast and getting ready. I went out and took another one, and went out and took another one. And anyways, later on after school that day, I was asked where the candies went in the bowl, and I said, I don't know, I didn't eat them. And long story short, I was found out. I blamed it on my sisters. They obviously told the truth, and I was caught. And I had to live with the consequences of that choice. So not only did I take the candies, but I lied about it. And so my parents actually told me to go sit in my room and think about what I did, and that's probably the worst punishment they can give me because I actually did that. And that obviously 40 years later that still sits with me. So it was something that I remember. But the point is, I had to live with the consequences of my choices. Now, in delegation of authority in a marriage, if you come from a Christian background, as I do, you may believe that the husband is the head of the household. Now, I'm not going to debate what that actually means and how that's carried out. My wife and I are on the same page in regards to this, and that's what works for us. The way I deal with this in our situation is my wife and I are partners. She has strengths, I have strengths. She has weaknesses, I have weaknesses, and we balance each other out. The one thing that I always tried to make sure, especially on the parenting side, was that we're on the same page and we provide a united front when raising the kids. And that's not always easy. There's some differences in how we can delegate authority within a marriage. 3 different ways to handle a situation where maybe your son or daughter comes and asks you for something. So if somebody comes to me, or one of my boys come to me and I say, ask your mother. So with those words, I have delegated to my wife. I wash my hands of the outcome. I wash my hands of the decision. Just go ask your mother. And so that if I've done that, then I cannot say and give her a hard time because I've delegated that to her. Now, the second way to deal with this is if your mother is okay with it, I'm okay with it. So that's conditional delegation. So if basically what I'm saying with that is whatever your mother decides, I'm going to back her up. And if you go the opposite, then we're both going to have a conversation with you because that was one way for me and my wife to stay on the same page. And then the third way to handle this is when they come and ask for something to go somewhere, to do something, or to buy something, or whatever. I'll talk with your mother. So that right there is teamwork. And that means, in my view, in those situations, there were some issues that we needed to discuss. I think teamwork is so important in a marriage, and there are in situation times where one spouse may delegate to the other spouse, but you got to keep in mind that there are consequences to how you delegate within that situation. So as I mentioned, when I say go ask your mother, I have basically washed my hands of the outcome. And I cannot give my wife a hard time because I wanted nothing to do with the decision. So I left the decision up to their mother. Versus, I'll talk with your mother and we'll get back to you. That is the ultimate teamwork. We've been through something before. We want to talk about some of the issues, or we know that our spouse may have an issue with it, whatever. And we talk through it. They don't have the benefit of hearing that conversation because there may be some things that they shouldn't hear. So that's very important. The other areas of household authority, finances. So in our case, my wife has her own business. So her business is her business. Unless she asks my advice, whatever she wants to do is her choice. However she wants to spend her money, it's her money to spend. And she deals with the consequences. And I am the same way. I've started a business and I've spent money and I've had to deal with my consequences. Major decisions, major financial decisions are made together in our household. Typically, we talk through it. I talk my wife, actually, I shared my story in the last week's episode. I shared the story of our printing business and the financial issue we got into. That was the one decision that I talked my wife into, and I swore I would never, ever do it again. And typically she leaves the financial stuff because that's more my strength than the financial side, and I say that ironically. But typically she leaves it to me. In terms of health, first aid, my wife was not trained. She was not taught basic health care, other than, the typical women stuff, but she wasn't taught that stuff. So it'd be silly for me to put that all on her, even though she's the mother, even though she's the primary caregiver. I had the knowledge and experience related to first aid, and if the boys come back bleeding, I took care of it. So again, it's recognition that there's strengths and weaknesses on both sides. Material stewardship and chores, again, I'm full transparency here. When we were younger, my wife typically took care of most of the stuff inside the house. I took care of stuff outside of the house. Now it's a little bit more balanced because we all grow. Safety, security, protection. An example of me kind of taking control in this situation is road trips. I drive on road trips because I want to take the responsibility of the safety of whoever's in the car with me. And I would not want to put that on my wife. So if she's a bit of a nervous driver and something happens, I don't want her to live with whatever happens. So I take that responsibility because I feel I can hold that responsibility, and if something happens, it's on me. Feeding and providing, a lot of that fell on my wife. Now I provided paychecks and so forth for working, but she, for the most part, took care of us by cooking meals. I cook a little bit more now, but typically over the past 26 years, she's done most of the cooking and sort of providing in that way. And the final piece of delegation in a marriage, and this is where I believe I take a lot of responsibility in this, because this is a foundation to my belief, is spirituality. And I think this is one area that we men are going to be held accountable for at the very end, is we're going to be held accountable for how we spiritually lead our family. And I took this very seriously in my marriage and in my parenting. So spirituality is one area where I didn't compromise a whole lot, and actually my family looked to me to provide that leadership. So there wasn't a ton of delegation of authority in that area. In the next segment, I just want to talk briefly about delegating authority at work. So in a career, it's standard practice. You need to delegate authority, especially working for larger organizations. And one of the things that we can do as we delegate or before we delegate is managing risk. So I talked a little bit about risk management last week. Risk management is one of the things you should consider before you actually delegate authority. So there's risk to yourself. There's risk to the person that you're delegating to. There's risk to other employees or coworkers. There's risk to the organization itself. There's risk to the public, to suppliers or vendors, and other stakeholders. There's a ton of things to consider when you're setting up delegations of authority, whether that's financial or other types of delegation of authority. And there's different ways that you can delegate. So in terms of delegating of authority for spending, there's a transaction limit that you can put on. So you can say to someone, say one of your managers, your annual budget is $30,000. I want to approve any one spend over $1,000. So you can spend up to 30, but I want to see any spends, any transactions over 1,000. Another limiting factor is the stakeholders that are involved. So if you have a very important contract, and say there's a number of contracts that you're managing, well, you may want to manage more of the contracts or the stakeholders involved in the contracts, the more strategic contracts, and other contracts you allow your employees to make more decisions around those contracts. I mean, all contracts are important, but there are some, strategic contracts that you may want to hold a little bit tighter because you have specific skills or relationship or whatever. Another limiting factor is the number of people impacted. So some decisions that may impact a small group, like maybe the supervisor and their 3 employees, have at it. Go ahead and make those decisions. If there's a decision that impacts our entire team, you're going to need to bounce that off me, and we're going to need to talk about it and how we implement it and so forth. So number of people impacted. And then finally, in terms of delegating authority at work, what controls are in place that will enable you to discover mistakes or discover issues with a decision? So how quickly will mistakes be discovered? And you can impact that by having certain controls in place to oversee and manage decisions of the authority that you've delegated. And at the end of the day, how do you want to be remembered? Are you the distrusting micromanager or the coach leader who's willing to foster growth in their employees? How do you want to be remembered about this? These are some things to think about when you are considering delegating authority at work. In the next segment, I want to talk about 4 ways we can overcome delegation challenges. So the first challenge is fear of losing control. And a lot of people struggle with this, and I've seen this a lot in different organizations that I work with. So if you fear losing control, start by delegating small, non-critical tasks to build trust in the delegation process itself. So not just a person, but getting used to the process of delegating. Communicate clear guidelines and expectations to maintain control over the outcome. So basically, as I mentioned, maybe you have some 3 things. I want to review your decisions weekly, or whatever the controls you want to put in place. And then gradually increase the complexity of the delegated task as trust grows. So start small and grow. Challenge number 2 is lack of trust in team members. I've also seen a lot of this in the workplace. And in my view, it is up to you as the delegator to invest time in training and mentoring team members to build their skills and your confidence in their abilities. You need to establish open and transparent communication channels to ensure team members can seek guidance or provide updates easily. So it's on you to build trust with the people that you delegate to. It's up to you to coach others and get them ready for making decisions. Third is perfectionism. So if you struggle with perfectionism, you do not want to delegate, and I've seen this over and over in my work experience as well as my personal life. I do not struggle with it myself. In fact, I'm probably just the opposite, which can have its own set of problems. But you need to, if you struggle with perfectionism, recognize that perfection is often unattainable. Doesn't matter who's making the decisions, it will not be attainable. And it can lead to a lot of inefficiency. So you need to set realistic standards and expectations for tasks. Again, if you focus on perfectionism, focus on the bigger picture and the overall goal rather than micromanaging every detail. What's more important, perfection or impact on somebody's life? Impact on somebody's life. And finally, fear of negative outcomes. I see this fairly often. Everybody hates being surprised with mistakes or surprised with things that happen. And so again, they hold on tight to the control that they have and the authority that they have. And if you have a fear of negative outcomes, then understand that mistakes happen. You're going to make mistakes. The people who work with you are going to make mistakes. It's how you respond to that. As a leader, as a person, mistakes are going to happen. But with the right mindset, you could look at those mistakes as an opportunity for growth. So this is where you can really create a culture where mistakes are seen as learning experience rather than failures. And you can implement contingency plans to manage those potential risks. As I mentioned before, there's some controls that you can put in place as you delegate to manage your expectations and manage anything that may happen negatively, so it will not have as much of an impact on yourself, on the employees, on the organization. So understand that mistakes may occur, but look at them as opportunities for growth. So, some tips for navigating delegation successfully. Real quick here. And I've touched on all of these. So first, build trust. Take time to build trust with your employees. And this, again, takes time and it takes experience and different experiences. Everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. It's your responsibility to find your employee strengths and treat them accordingly. So build trust. Set clear and reasonable expectations. If you're a perfectionist, if you fear negative outcomes, those may drive your expectations, and you may make expectations for an employee who you've delegated to that they'll never reach. And I've seen in the past where they've set these unreasonable expectations, the employee doesn't meet them, so they haul back the control. And that is absolutely devastating to your employees. So set clear and reasonable expectations. Thirdly, adequate authority. You need to give them enough authority to get the job done. Giving them partial authority or giving them a decision and then questioning their decision all the time is just, again, it kills the relationship and it kills an employee's self-esteem. Clear communication to delegate. To the team as well. The team needs to understand that this person has been given the authority to make decisions in this area. You set that expectation. You communicate to the team that this person has been delegated to. And then once you do those things, support the delegate. Again, they're going to make mistakes. Don't go to them and say in front of everybody, you made this mistake. If they've made a mistake, talk to them off to the side. Ask them about what happened, how they went about making the decision, what happened, how did they deal with it. Use it as an opportunity to coach them, but support them. Support them as individuals and support them in front of the team. And then manage the results. So as you delegate and share opportunities for a person, for an employee to make decisions, monitor the situation, evaluate how they make decisions, coach them, follow up with them, put processes in place, Get to know them. Your job as a leader who delegates authority is to learn those you are leading. So learn them. And the best way to do that is to allow them to make decisions and manage the work in a way that meets their strengths. But that you need to also coach them at the same time. So build trust, clear and reasonable expectations, adequate authority, clear communication to delegate to the team, support the delegate, and then manage the results, monitor, evaluate, and follow up. We are nearing the end of our time today, so let's review the key points here. So 1, I talked about the benefits of delegating, which were increased productivity and efficiency, empowerment and skill development, and improved work-life balance and reduced stress. Second key point, we busted some myths. Delegation of authority means you choose to strategically move the time and effort of making choices elsewhere to someone else, but you still accept the consequences regardless. You still take responsibility for whatever happens. And third key point from today is delegation requires thought, communication, and trust. It provides risk and reward, but at the end, it builds a solid team. So that's the show for today. I appreciate you staying around and listening to our presentation on delegation of authority. Tune in next week where we're going to cover making decisions. So kind of the next step in delegating authority, we're going to talk about making decisions. So thank you again and have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.